Time to rise and shine.
Something strange is happening to Shane and her dog, Kitty.
I gotta go. All you people are sick.
Nos hoc to Lucifer, parceps egregius.
One day, I had a teacher of God look at my channel and tell me that I'm damning people to the gates of hell. As a storyteller, you would think that I would praise other horror YouTubers for their talents in presenting creepy stories and all. How we hear stories that have us fearing the ghosts, the horrors that lurk in the dark, the slender man who's watching you within the woods. But when it comes to a man with a fancy suit and a Bible in his hand who stands before an audience telling them an ancient horror story of an evil hovering over their shoulders, the influence of Satan is upon them. Beware of his ways of tempting us to his paradise of damnation. My children, we are at a crisis. Our lives are at risk. There is a war upon us between the forces of good and evil, and now is the time to wake up and stand before this unholy threat. Save yourself and take Jesus into your heart, my children. Here's what I believe, what I see. A teacher of God who has proven to be more successful as a horror storyteller than myself or any other horror YouTuber. Just look at the spoils of the success. How these teachers build empires out of the belief that our spiritual lives are at risk. And yet, they have not provided one piece of solid, concrete evidence of a demon or a Satan. Today, my friends, we're going to go to those gates of hell. And according to these teachers of God, who have comfortably used their beliefs to damn other human beings to a world of internal suffering because of how their lifestyles, sexuality, race, beliefs, overall, being a human being that does not abide by their selfish expectations and warped perspective of the world and how it should be. These teachers will say that I'm damning your soul to hell. I wonder what they would say when I drop my pants and piss my name all over the gates of hell. Because I'm not the one who brought it here. You know what I think, my friends? I believe that behind these gates of hell is a horror that is far worse and more terrifying than the world of demons and devils. And that's what today's story. A teacher of God who had reaped the spoils of spiritual warfare to build a vast empire in God's name. This man, named Gregorus, had far succeeded his goals of wealth and satisfied his human desires. In this world, my friends, Gregorus had conquered evil, and looking down upon the world from his ivory tower, those children beneath him, who believed that God had given this man his wealth and power. Depression had overtaken him, for Gregorus had reached the highest point of his crusade, and yet there's nothing to show for it. Looking back, all those times that people believed that there was signs of God that supported Gregorus, deep down inside, they were not enough to bring satisfaction to him. If only God were to truly answer his prayers, to speak to him, to reveal himself to Gregorus, to show approval or verification for his crusade. Or is it that Gregorus was seeking God to take credit for his appetite for wealth and power? And regardless of his prayers, his attempts of healing and helping others, God has refused to answer, for Gregorus felt forsaken. In the midst of this crippling depression, Gregorus's assistant had offered an idea that was beyond unethical and mad, but just might be the very thing that will succeed in receiving an audience with God. What if Gregoris were to place his own soul in jeopardy? What if Gregoris had decided to establish a meeting with him, Satan himself? After everything he had done, the faith that humanity has within Gregoris, surely God will intervene and save his soul. So how does one receive an audience with the Lord of Darkness? Much like his efforts with God, Gregoris found his methods of summoning Satan going unsuccessful. A year disgracing his teachings by performing the most vile acts, venturing into other faiths that defiled God, that were ultimately hindering his crusade, performing such ungodly acts, and yet his demands for Satan remained ignored. Then one day, Gregoris developed an idea. What if he were to build hell on earth, an inferno that will surely attract Satan, coming to roost there like a cuckoo in a serpent nest? In order to construct such a design, Gregoris had to venture to a madhouse in the outskirts of Florence, Italy, seek out an architect named Leopardo, a Satan worshipper and murderer who had a talent of sketching palaces that had a sadistic and lunatic grandeur to them, all devoted to his lord Satan. And after granting Leopardo his freedom and his own taste of wealth for his ungodly talents, the design was complete. Was it truly his success against evil that Gregoris felt when looking at the design? Or was he admiring the beauty of this creation? His creation. After finding a site in North Africa, Gregoris had broken so many records when constructing his hell on earth. Its vast foundations, elaborate plumbing, and thick walls, Gregoris had lost most of his fortune to this project. As a result of this moment in history, Gregoris had lost friends. His followers started to diminish. Investors backed out, refused to partake within this insanity. The world didn't understand his reasons for building such an ungodly thing on earth, for they thought that Gregoris had lost his mind. And looking upon the slow construction of his citadel, Gregoris did not care for the backlash. He was fully determined to proceed further down this darkened path, and do what other men like him had never done before. They will all see. This will become a moment in history where Gregoris will face Satan himself and prove the existence of God. And it took 4 years before this building was finished. The size of half of a dozen cathedrals, and every room and inch of this building all designed for the devil's pleasure. And in the midst of this structure, this hell, sits Gregoris, alone, withholding that fear and waiting. Every room and corridor with its walls burning with fire and lined with instruments of death that satisfied one's appetite for torture and sadism, ovens large enough to cremate families, pools deep enough to drown generations, baths heated with feces and urine. This was an atrocity waiting to happen, a celebration to inhumanity, and yet it was a hell that lacked one important element. There was an empty throne. There was no ruler to this hell. And it was on the first day in this cathedral when Gregoris's efforts had came with results, signs of life within this building, noises in the lower level. And by investigating the strange disturbance, maintaining his composure, his confidence, his faith that he will succeed in his conquest against the Prince of Darkness, Gregoris had found nothing to the noises he heard. He was for sure that it was the signs of Satan. In the days that followed, Gregoris had found himself pursuing these noises that disturbed his hell. Was this Satan keeping to the shadows? Could it be that the Lord of Darkness fears him? But this is not how Gregoris wanted his victory over Satan. He had went too far into this project, for he needs to face Satan himself, to stand before the world as the man who had confronted and spit Satan in the face before he was saved by God. Let the devil play his games. But in time, Satan will have to face Gregoris. He will have to answer to his summons. And Gregoris, a man who succumbed to this game of cat and mouse, obsession slowly began to overtake him, his sanity diminishing. We all know that Satan is a coward. Why not reveal himself? Why not come and claim his prize? All this for him. Come, Satan, and do what you do best. Come and slaughter the fresh lamb on the slab. Come and have your way with the teacher of God. Come and violate this flesh. Come and seize the opportunity to hurt God. Let Jesus weep. And Gregorus frantically searching every room, every corridor, that fingerprint on the door handle, the turd on the floor. Surely it must be the signs of Satan. Sooner or later, this fiend will show itself to Gregorus. Satan will come. Satan has to come. The cathedral had immediately became the eighth wonder of the world. But its presence had given humanity a feeling of uneasiness. A man who had spent decades saving the human population from the forces of evil and find love in the arms of God within this spiritual warfare. This man, Gregorus, had literally built the gates of hell on earth and is trying to gain an audience with Satan. His reasons, in a way, was understandable, but this was undeniably wrong. Outside the cathedral, the world never knew of the horrors within the structure. Workers have felt uneasy when the project was done, believing that they had captured a glimpse of Satan during construction. To add more to this idea of Satan being involved, the architect Leopardo would later be found dead, having people believe that a superstitious force may have thrown him out the window of a second-story building, instead of thinking that he was actually murdered by someone or succumbed to his madness and committed suicide. The world outside never heard from Gregorus, nor any idea of what was taking place within the cathedral. People had came to the conclusion that Gregorus was a man who was ruined by wealth. Eventually, his folly had attracted visitors, thrill-seekers, adventurers wanting to explore this controversial wonder, people who would dare venture into the gates of hell. And well, when news began to spread of visitors, tourists worldwide, and even locals being reported missing, that was when the authorities got involved, and the world would be shocked after what was found inside that cathedral. It was described as one of the most shocking and darkest moments in human history. When the authorities went inside the cathedral on behalf of the growing cases of missing people, there was no words to describe the fear that the officers felt when entering the building. Due to the lack of maintenance, the cathedral had deteriorated badly. Its lights faltered, the fires dimmed, flies were everywhere, and that overwhelming stench that lingered in the dense, humid air. Inside, the officers found no Satan, but the throne to this hell was not empty. That is where they found Gregorus, surrounded by followers he had accumulated over time, who were as equally less human and mad as he was. In every room, every corridor, were remains of those missing people, victims who were found with their bodies cut, gouged, pricked, cannibalized, violated, molested, and added a sadistic decoration to this hell. Gregorus did not resist arrest, for he was pleased with the outcome of his crusade, and so excited to boast his success to the world. And that's exactly what happened, my friends. How Gregorus stood up in court and spoke to the world of his horrid acts. For this man confessed his appetite for greed and power during his days as a teacher of God, and how that was nothing compared to what he experienced. Every torture device had been used. Every unthinkable act had been performed within that cathedral, made by his own hands. Speaking freely of how humanity's ignorance and cowardice granted him the keys of success that you would have thought we humans had developed from the Dark Ages, our crippling fear of turning against each other over superstition, how we turn against each other so easily because of a spreading disease or failed crops. Gregorus proudly preached how we are creatures of hate, fear, and ignorance, and this crusade had not went without its own success. How is Gregorus any different against those who weaponize God against their fellow man? The crusade of Gregorus had proven that God is rotting in paradise, and Satan is drowning in the abyss. And Gregorus will not stop spilling blood, for he has damned humanity itself. And there is no God and no Satan that can stop him. Nothing can stop him. I believe that faith is essential to our lives. Spiritually, it helps us push through the struggles and hardship in life. What I don't agree with is when other people are being damned to the gates of hell because of their sexuality, their beliefs, or even when making the wrong choices in life. Who are we to make such decisions for other people? You know, my friends, I may have taken you to the gates of hell, but it's not my decision to open these gates. Respectfully, that's your choice to make. And you know what else I believe? Is if I open these gates, I'm convinced that what I find inside is no demons, no devil, no fire nor brimstone, no pain and suffering. What I'm going to find is nothing. And when you really think about it, that is more terrifying, because all those people who gave themselves to this idea that their lives are under attack by an unseen force, who had given so much to save themselves from the horrors in the afterlife, and all the people who were damned, hated, disowned, outcasted, and even died as a result of spiritual warfare. There are people in this world who don't have the courage to accept this possible reality, and will rather find comfort in the idea that these gates should remain closed, and that humanity should remain vigilant against unseen forces. And then you have people like Gregorus, who would enter through these gates and prove somebody like me wrong by becoming a creator of their own hell, and stand before the world, sharing horror stories that involve Satan taking responsibility for their own creation and decisions in life, and let God take credit for the spoils of their war against this evil. After the incident, in what was considered to be the greatest act against evil, people from all around the world gathered together and tore down the cathedral. As for Gregorus, after the trial, he was committed to an asylum. 2 months later, he had unexpectedly died. Even though nobody knows how he died, there is a strong belief that somewhere in his own mind, in his own world, Gregorus is suffering and burning in the hell of his own design.